Good evening, partners. My name remains Ambassador Elvis Smart, the businessman that loves the things of God. So tonight, I want us to look at the game the rich people play with their money. And I would want us to use the Dangote Refinery as a case study to what we want to do tonight. So I want you to follow me as we move forward. Now, in the mainstream news report, we've seen that Dangote Group has announced plans to list 10% of its shares for public purchase. That is to say, Dangote has decided to give out 10% shares to the general public for you and I to buy. So, but we want to see the game that these people, the game that they play, or the standard practice, the normal practice of how these things work all over the world. So I want to come closer because I want to open your eyes to some of those things we do not know. I want to open your eyes to see why Sir Dangote has been projected to become massively wealthy by next year when his refinery is listed in the stock exchange. So going forward, we all know that the Dangote refinery cost 20 billion US dollar to bring it to where it is today. So if we decide to break down the financing of that very project, we'll bring them into three categories of investors. The first investors, the individual investors. These people might include the friends of Dangote, the people, the likes of Tony Lumelu, the likes of Kostarix, Jim Ovia, or $10. So Sir Dangote would have called them together and say, guys, I want to take part in this project. I want you invest in what I'm doing. They will say, sure, we are coming in. Let's assume that these names I've mentioned, that they pulled together 5 billion US dollar. And again, institutional investors like banks, hedge funds, and the rest, these people pulled together 5 billion US dollar. And again, going forward, Dangote Group decided to bring 10 billion US dollar over the years to finance this very refinery that we see now that the whole Nigeria as a country, we are celebrating for that great success. Now, the way it works is what we call the pre-IPO stage. The pre-IPO stage is the stage where these investors I've just mentioned, where they brought in their money in order to buy that shares. So in this stage, Dangote would have sold the shares for them for 5 cents per share. We are just assuming, we are taking it. This is actually what has happened, but we may not be right, or I may not be right with the figure I'm putting up here, but this is exactly how it operates. So assuming Dangote gave them in the memorandum of understanding that they signed, he gave them 50 cents per share for every money they are bringing in. So if we translate that into figure, we have a 20 billion US dollar by 5 cents. We will now have 400 billion unit of shares, 400 billion unit of allotment shares. So we can see it here. This is the allotment shares that the Dangote refinery has that is worth 20 billion US dollar that we've just seen. So going further from the pre-IPO stage now, the money is completed. These great individuals, institutional financial platforms, they've given out this money to Dangote. The deal has been signed. But take note, none of them invited you and I, the ordinary man. They didn't ask you and I, the ordinary man, to come and join what they are doing. They just happen to organize the fund among themselves, among those big names. Nobody involved us. Now they want to go to the public. This is the time they want to involve you and I. They want to involve you and I. Now, they are not also going to buy from the public, but this is the time they want to sell that which they've purchased. And now they want to involve you and I. Follow me as we go forward in this education and eye-opening stage. So this, when they are being listed next year, 2026, is what we call the public listing or IPO, initial public offering. So the Dangote now wants to give the public 10% of the total shares that they have. So if we bring that 10% against the 400 billion shares we've mentioned already, that will translate to 40 billion shares, which means Dangote want to give out 40 billion shares to the general public. Now we want to know by projection how this is going to work and how they make their money. Now, after Dangote has done every necessary obligations, has gone through the investment banks, they evaluated whatever he's putting into the market and the cost the refinery will be, we want to assume that the investment bank will advise Dangote to list its shares for 50 cents per share, as we are seeing here. So in the listing of Dangote's share, Dangote will be listing it one share for 50 cents per share. So Dangote is giving out 10% to the general public. That means those who bought during the pre-IPO sales, they will now have the right to sell some portion of their shares. And what they bought for 5 cents, now by law or the stock market rules, they are now allowed to sell it for 50 cents per share. Now, if we multiply this 10% shares the Dangote want to offer to the general public, if we multiply that 10%, which is 40 billion allotment shares, if we multiply it by 50 cents, we'll be having 20 billion US dollars. So 20 billion US dollars is the actual cost, Dangote used in building that refinery. So by listing into the stock market and selling to the general public, you and I, for 50 cents, only 10% of the worth of that refinery. These people, angel investors, individual investors, Dangote Group, they've been able to bring back their capital that they invested in that refinery by just selling 10% of their holdings. So if they sell 10%, which means they've raised 20 billion US dollar in return. So what happens now? The IPO investors that bought at 5%, now, why the general public, we are buying at 50%, these people will be cashing out. So I said here, the general public really gets the opportunity to buy during the pre-IPO stage. They don't give you and I this opportunity, they seize this opportunity to themselves, and they bring it to the public where they want you and I now to participate at a higher price. So the rich and their wealthy friends usually secure these opportunities long before the general public is even aware of what is going on. So that is how it operates. That is how it works. There is nothing wrong with it. That is why they are being called angel investors. So let us go forward to look at what happens to the remaining 90% worth of Dangote's refinery. Now, they've given out 10% to the general public, and with that 10%, they've been able to generate back the capital they used in building Dangote's refinery. Moving forward now, the real wet game where I want us to move in is the remaining 90% holdings that they have. If we translate this 90% to allotment shares, we will have 360 billion shares. Remember, it was 400 billion shares. We removed 40 billion shares that has already been given to the general public. Now, the Dangote Group and his investors, his friends, they now have 360 billion allotment shares. So the game now is that this very 90% that is left, where the worth now is the worth that they've listed in the stock market. Remember, they bought it for 5 cents. Now the price at the secondary market now is 50 cents. So their 90% holdings is multiplied by the price they are now selling it in the public market. That is to say, 50 cents per share multiplied by 360 billion allotment shares. That will give us in dollar 180 billion US dollar. That will give us 180 billion US dollar. Now, by the 10% allotment share they give to the public, remember, they've broken even. They've regained the money they spent in building that refinery. So what we are seeing here now is the profit they have made for 10 years of their investment. For the past 10 years, they've invested in this project. This is the profit Dangote Group and all that financed the project. This is the profit they've been making from the very first day this very shares is being listed at the stock market. And don't stop there. They might list today because the number of shares they release to the general public is very small, which means there will be massive competition. There will be massive rush for people to acquire these 10% shares. And by these tactics, these shares we are seeing might even fly to $1 US. It might even fly to $2 US. Multiply that to the 90% holdings that they are having. So as it's standing now from our analysis, the Dangote Group and her friends will be worth 180 billion US in profit. This is not peculiar to the Dangote Refinery, but a standard business practice of wealth creation. This is a standard business practice of wealth creation all over the world. So the smart move in a nutshell here is that by selling 10% of the company, Dangote raises 20 billion US, exactly what was invested in building the refinery. Now, the company now recovers its full capital investment. So they get back their money while still holding 90% of the company. Now, the 90% they are holding of the company is now their profits. They have the right to sell whatever they want, but because Dangote and his friends, they want to be in control of the refinery, that is why they will still be holding 90% of the refinery. So going forward now, like I said, is the general practice everywhere in the world. Going forward, let's look at how these people became multi-millionaires. When we look at Peter Thiel, he turned $500,000 invested in Facebook during pre-IPO, just like what we saw with the Dangote Refinery now. He turned $500,000 US into $1.1 billion plus after the listing of Facebook in the secondary market. And again, Jim Breyer also turned $1 million invested in Facebook pre-IPO into $400 million US at IPO. Again, if we look at Andy invested in Google pre-IPO. He invested $100,000. He was able to translate that into $1 billion US plus at IPO. Again, if we look at Chris turned 2.45 million invested in Uber in pre-IPO. He turned this figure into $2 billion US plus at IPO. Again, if we look at Megan and Jacqueline Bezos, these are the parents of Jeff Bezos. They invested $245,000 US in Amazon during IPO. As it stands now, they are worth over $30 billion US plus at IPO. If we look at Alicia, he turned $200 million invested in Facebook into $1.4 billion US at IPO. Like I said, that is a standard practice all over the world. So all these figures I've given you here, go and verify them. They are all stand and they are in. So you've missed out that very project. You didn't have the opportunity to participate in Dangote's refinery. You didn't have the opportunity to participate in Facebook, Google, Uber, name them, all the multinational companies that you know. But today, I want to invite you to take part in another groundbreaking technology that will soon hit the world, and that is UST string technology. We have been financing this very project from stage 1. We are now in stage 15, and the stage 15 is the last stage. So this is your choice to secure shares before the company goes public. Position yourself for potential high return as the company grows. Be part of an innovative global technology ventures. Don't miss this rare opportunity to invest at this ground level. ahead of the IPO we are looking forward to. The window is closing and the next phase is public listing. So act today and become part of the future of Uniski Strength Technology. Now, the portion of the company is being sold now for 13 cents, from 4 cents to 13 cents. It's very cheap. And by the nominal value of any allotment portion that you have is $1 minimum at the stock market. What does that mean? Like we analyzed the Dangote Refinery, people buying it for 5 cents and later sold for 50 cents. The price we are supporting Uniski Strength Technology per portion is 4 cents to 13 cents. And by memorandum of understanding or the law of the stock market, the nominal price will be $1 minimum, will be $1. Imagine if you use the opportunity now to get for yourself 10,000 units of this portion, which is about $12,000. You are holding what is known as 1 million portion, and that 1 million portion is minimum of $1 million at IPO. Beloved, this is how the rich made generational wealth. This is how the likes of Donald Trump, the likes of Warren Buffett, the likes of Sawolowo and the rest, this is how they make their money. And I want to ask you a very simple question. Sir Peter Obi, what is he doing? Sir Peter Obi has invested so much in dividend-paying companies. Lest I forget, dividend also is there, but in another video, for this not to be too long, I'll be talking about dividend and how you can take advantage of dividend-paying companies. So now I invite you to see what we are doing with Uniski Strength Technology. We are building alternative transport system that is going to take over 60% of our traditional transport system that we have today. It will complement some and it will take over some. So you can see even from the passenger, freight, high-speed transportation, they are all available for implementation. And as I'm speaking to you, we are already in the commercialization stage, whereby in Belarus and other countries, our project is already there, making wave massively. So tonight, I want you to listen to this many times as you can and DM me, ask me, Ambassador Smart, how can I join or become part of the Uniski Strength Technology project? I'll be so glad to guide you how to get your certificate of portions you've purchased immediately. You purchase your portions, you'll be given certificate as a guarantee that you are part of those financing this project. I want to stop here. I believe I've exposed us to the ways the rich people of this world, the way they've been able to amass massive wealth, generational wealth. Until we meet again, remain blessed and God bless you. I remain your humble friend and brother, Ambassador Elvis Smart, the businessman that loves the things of God. Thank you and God bless you.